We are now reading from chapter 16, and this is The Rape of the Mind by Juste Amberlou, MD. Education for discipline or higher morale. The role of education. The child's formative years are spent under the guidance of first parents and then teachers. Jointly they influence his future behavior. The educational system can either reinforce or correct parental errors and attitudes, either strengthen the child's desire to grow toward freedom and maturity, or stifle his need to develop and twist it into the need to resign himself to permanent childishness and dependence. Since the Renaissance, the ideal of universal scholastic training has made steady gains, but today we unwittingly tend to mold minds into a prefabricated pattern and to give our students the illusion that they know or have to know all the answers. The fallacy of such half-education is that the so-called alphabetics, in contrast to those who cannot read, may become better followers and worse thinkers. The totalitarians, for example, are not against schools. On the contrary, for the more you overburden the mind with facts, the more passive it may become. Intellectual erudition and book learning alone do not make strong personalities, and in our passion for factual education and the quiz type of examination, there lies hidden a form of mental pressure. The awe with which we regard the accumulation of school facts may inhibit the mind so that it cannot think for itself. We must become more aware of the involuntary pressures on education an educational system can impose on us, and their possible dangerous effects on the future of our democratic society. The actual strategy of keeping people as permanent students under prolonged supervision is a help to the totalitarian indoctrination. For instance, somewhere along the line in some administrative minds there sprang up the idea that repeated comparative examinations would increase the quality of the corps of administrators. Instead, infantile anxieties developed related to the fear of this infantile tool of measurement and evaluation, the examination. There is now hardly any administrator who dares to look at reality as the best test of human capacity and human endurance. The form of education which sets a premium on dependency, which over-controls a child, which makes a moral appeal through punishment and provoking a sense of guilt, which overrates the mechanical skills and automatic learning, this form of education needs the brain into a pattern of conformity which can easily be turned into totalitarian channels. This is even more the case in regard to the disciplinary training of soldiers. Such rigid education glorifies good behavior far too much. Imitation and conformity are approved at the expense of spontaneous creativity, thinking for oneself, and the free expression and discussion of dissenting ideas. Our examination mania forces students into mental pathways of automatic thinking. Our intellectual and so-called objective education overrates rationalism and technical know-how under the delusion that this will keep emotional errors under control. What it does instead, of course, is to train children into automatic patterns of thinking and acting, which are closer to the pattern of conditioned reflexes of which Pavlovian students are so fond than they are to the free, exploratory, creative pattern toward which democratic education should be oriented. Totalitarianism is well aware that youth has a sensitive period during which Pavlovian conditioning may be established without difficulty. Early teachings from nearly indestructible patterns in the child's mind and eventually replace innate instinctual precision. This early Pavlovian automation of life may itself develop almost the force of an innate instinct. Indeed, this is precisely what happens in totalitaria. Trying to keep from sneezing here. Dictators especially organize youth and press them to join disciplinary youth movements. The paradox of universal literacy is that it may create a race of men and women who have become, just because of this new intellectual approach to life, much more receptive to the indoctrination of their teachers or leaders. Do we need conditioned adepts or free-thinking students? Beyond this, our technical means of communication have caught up with our literacy. The eye that can read is immediately caught by advertising and propaganda. This is the tremendous dilemma of our epoch. In many of our primary schools, students are taught in an atmosphere of compulsive regimentation and are imprinted with a sense of dependency and awe of authority which lasts throughout their lives. They never really learn to think for themselves. The scholastic factories, the schools, keep many pupils too busy to think. They may instead educate them into progressive immaturity. As long as people can quote one another in the available expert opinion, they are considered well-informed and intellectual. Many schools emphasize what we could call a quotation mania, making the ability to quote the epitome of all wisdom. Yet anyone with an apparently unquestionable logic, anyone who can back up his position with authoritative statements and quotations, can have a strong impact on such a mind, for it can readily be caught and conditioned by emotionally attractive pseudo-intellectual currents. As a matter of fact, in the process of brainwashing, the inquisitor makes use of the feeling of confusion his victim gets when he is shown that his facts don't fit and that there are flaws in his concepts. The man who doesn't know the tricks of argument will break down sooner. I guess that's why we should all be studying. We should have been studying Cicero in school when we were younger. I like to distinguish among the intellectuals, quantellectuals, and quintellectuals. The former aim for quantity of knowledge and easily yield to any kind of new conditioning. To the quintellectuals, on the other hand, intellect is a quality of personal integrity. Facts are not consumed passively, but are weighed and verified. This kind of intellect has a potentiality independent of school education, and often school can spoil it. One of the most amazing cases I ever treated was a typical quantellectual, a doctor of psychology who had just completed his university education with a dissertation on the psychotechnical subject. He came to me because he was a complete failure in all of his relationships with girls. He wanted this impotence to be treated medically, and at first he rejected any kind of psychotherapy because he knew all that stuff. In the course of our conversation, it became apparent that his entire scholastic education had bypassed him. He had gotten A's at school, but the very essence of what he had studied had eluded him. He had grasped literally nothing about psychology. He had memorized everything and had understood nothing. He could quote from every page of the book, but explain none. Every time he had to work out a test or give practical advice, he went into a panic. It took years of treatment to break through his rigid, compulsive habits and to bring him to a point where he was able to think and feel as a human being rather than as a machine. At the end of his treatment, he started to learn all over again, reading with greed and fervor what had before been empty facts. And that's where I'll stop for right now. And we will pick this up in the next video. This was video number 1 of chapter 16. We are reading from The Rape of the Mind. And don't fret, the book is going to be over soon. A couple more chapters after this one.